Thanks to Magic Mind for sponsoring this video.
Apple Intelligence hacked already. Did Apple lie to us?
Welcome to the All Future Podcast, where we talk all things tech, Apple, AI, humanoid robots, and much more throughout the week. We're bringing out videos throughout the week, so if you're subscribed, we really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, we'd appreciate it, and just generally appreciate you watching
A lot of appreciation across the board. We just appreciate you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always having these discussions, and today we're talking in particular about Apple's latest thing, which is Apple Intelligence, and as it relates to the required hardware for it in particular. So with Apple Intelligence, it is now available in the, I believe it's actually the developer beta, not yet the public beta, but anyone pretty much very easily can get that developer beta. Last week I talked about how there was a wait list for it, and I had signed up, and that wait list ended up being about like 2 hours, and I got Apple Intelligence right after we talked on the podcast. I've been using it throughout the last week, just kind of finding more use cases of, let me try to do that. Let me try to ask Siri various questions. Even basic stuff is kind of nice to type to Siri for stuff. Like one example I had is I wanted to know the temperature and then what time sunset was. I could have navigated to the weather app, but I actually don't really use that app that much. I don't, intuitively know where all that information is. So I just typed to Siri, what's the temperature outside? And then I just said sunset ? And it gave me those results. So it's a pretty cool system. It seems to be quick, but it's only available on iPhone 15 Pros and then M devices. It should be, at least it will be coming to them. So the question has been, is it really necessary to have this latest hardware? And Matt, prior to this new, attempt to put this on older devices, what were your thoughts on that?
On this channel, we talk a lot about tech that makes your life better. But what is the most important thing in your life throughout the entirety of it? Your mind, man. You got to take care of that. And that's why we love Magic Mind over here.
Basically what it is, it's a mental performance shot. And it has a bunch of things like ceremonial grade matcha, organically grown mushrooms, nootropics, adaptogens, all sorts of things that add up to improve the general ATP that is operating in your brain.
Right. And what I really love about it, this isn't like a coffee replacement. It's not like one of those things that make you jittery and feel weird. You take this along with your coffee, and it just improves how that caffeine is interacting with your body, giving you just a nice uplift throughout over time instead of like a jittery hit.
I've been using this for quite some time, and I notice especially if I have a busy day with a bunch of videos to do or something, a lot of different tasks, I have one of these and I'm incredibly productive and really get into the zone. One especially cool thing is that it is 100% carbon neutral to be taking Magic Mind, and they donate 5 cents for every bottle sold to mental health charities that help U.S. homeless communities.
Guys, one of the things about this, it says it right on the side of the bottle, reclaim your brain. And that's honestly how I feel when I take this. I feel like I'm actually like more in the zone, like you said, more in control. And more importantly, I feel productive and not exhausted.
So to check out Magic Mind for yourself, you can go to magicmind.com/allfuture20. The code allfuture20 will get you 48% off of your first subscription for the next 10 days or 20% off for a one-time purchase.
Oh man, I this is a rare win for me in predicting something accurately on the podcast. I feel like, because I talked about how, undoubtedly this can run on older devices, right? It just probably doesn't run to the peak top of the performance that it can on the newer stuff. And Apple instantly saw that as a great excuse to make a hard line in the sand and encourage people to upgrade. So this news surprises me zero.
Yeah. So Apple Intelligence, it's only available on certain devices, but Apple is known to do that where they give us a new software feature for the latest device, and we're like, does it really need the latest? I mean, maybe it works the best on the latest version, and it's up to their standard, but it probably could run on older devices. So there is a video on YouTube that is a whole walkthrough of how to install Apple Intelligence onto an older device. So they do this on an older iPad. They succeed with getting Apple Intelligence functioning, and they're using the updated Siri and all of that stuff. And so it just shows us that it is available, or is successfully operating on older devices that are slower. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? I guess really at the end of the day, this is just a hack.
Yeah. I wouldn't do it. But
Yeah.
our producer Andrew put in the notes, he's like, if I was 16, I would definitely do this. And I'm like, oh yeah, that checks out. That's exactly who's
Yeah.
going to do this, right? It's like kids who have older models and are kind of into doing hack kind of stuff, and it's going to seem like a cool thing to do. I'm not interested in risking any of my devices to try to get Apple Intelligence working on it. But
Yeah.
I it is it does, I mean, it proves that, oh, like Apple was lying, I guess, for lack of a better term, which I think there's some gray area in there.
Yeah.
But it does, it's jailbreaking. That's what it is. It reminds me of the old jailbreaking times, and it's like, oh, like people trying to get around Apple's kind of walled garden and control over their hardware and software to get some kind of feature, which is cool if you want to do it. I think, like this video does it on like just an old iPad. That seems like the perfect thing to experiment on with this. I don't think I would try to get it working on my phone for risk of really messing something up.
Yeah, I wouldn't, like, if you're on an iPhone 14 Pro or 14 or whatever, I wouldn't try this, but we'll see. Maybe it will be a fun thing for people to do. But what always happens with this, and if you ever jailbroke your phone back in the day, is Apple comes out with a software update and then then they have to respond with the jailbreak latest version, and it's just a constant chase kind of like that. And then if you want the latest security features, you have to upgrade to that latest Apple software. So I feel like eventually Apple just always wins in these cases, because you're like, oh, I don't want to be this far behind and this far back on security and all of the. I'm not actually getting the latest Apple features. So yeah, I probably wouldn't do this. I mean, I bricked iPod Touch probably when I was 16. I was in tears, I think, because I saved up my hard-earned money for this iPod Touch, and then suddenly it was just completely bricked because of trying to jailbreak it. But it does show us that this stuff can work on older devices, and I guess maybe once we get more functionality of it is when we'd probably see why it's necessary to have the latest chip and everything.
Definitely, right? That's the other thing too. Like what is going to, like, as it actually advances, because most of the kind of advertised features aren't even there yet, So how is it going to work as things keep going? Probably worse and worse, and you're going to need those better chips, especially for the onboard task. And that's the other thing with this too. It's interesting. I was actually messing around with this. I got the old iPhone 1 out here again.
Ooh, iPhone 1.
And I mean, Safari still works on this, so I can go to OpenAI and use ChatGPT on an iPhone 1. Like nothing's stopping. Like this has the ability to do that. I mean, incredibly old machines have the ability to do that. I'm sure there's I haven't looked, but I'm sure there's someone who's like running some old kind of like MS-DOS command line internet browser system, and they're able to access GPT through that some kind of way, So I mean, the all the AI that's happening off device, all the device needs to do is be able to connect to the internet and run a modern browser. So that's where it's kind of a little misnomer to say something like, oh, Apple was lying to say that you had to have these new devices. Well, for some features, maybe you don't. I mean, obviously you don't. Again, an iPhone 1 is going to be able to do a lot of AI features, but for all those on-device things, and as Apple Intelligence on-device stuff becomes more and more prominent, which I think that seems to be the way Apple wants to go, is bring as much stuff on device as they can, then I think it's really going to make a difference if you have those newer devices or not.
Yeah, and you can sense the speed of certain things when you're playing around with the current version of Apple Intelligence. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely doing this on a device, or it's seeking these things. It also, like, as you're typing, it's autofilling prompts of things you could be typing and could be wanting to command through it, and it almost feels like a really, really good version of Spotlight, of just the general search across the whole operating system, but you can actually engage it and have it do things for you, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I think that's going to be the big difference going forward, like you said, because it's true. The oldest device in the book, as long as it can run Safari, it doesn't matter, because none of the speed is actually occurring on device for that to happen. It's all to servers, and then all you get is your just basic return of that very minimal website data.
And speaking of ChatGPT, something we talked about a couple weeks ago was the idea of Apple investing in them, and it seems like Not happening. Again, I don't think there's a lot to read into here. Apple considers investing in a lot of stuff and then doesn't. We talked in that actual episode about how Apple has an entire investment company that they use to invest in many things, and and because that company is wholly owned by Apple, they don't have to disclose what they're investing in. So just because they decided, oh, we're not going to go this round, doesn't mean they don't invest in the future, or eventually when OpenAI actually makes an IPO and anyone can invest in it. But I guess it lends some kind of questioning, though, is, well, the two things you can walk away from with this is, does it mean Apple is not confident in OpenAI's tech and its growth potential? That's one option, right? Another option is maybe Apple doesn't want to be investing in a thing that they see as a competitor in the future, which seems to me a pretty likely option. And the third thing is Apple just decided that, we want to do something else with our money today. So it could be just something like pretty innocuous. Is that let's wait till next quarter to do something like that. So so that's what's going on. I don't know, man. Do you have any other kind of read on this?
I think it's a lot of that stuff. And there's also been a lot of, I guess, just stories about OpenAI lately that maybe when Apple doesn't want to be linked to those headlines, there's been all this stuff about safety, and ChatGPT or OpenAI has been fairly open about like the safety things they've been running for ChatGPT behind the scenes. And it's good that they're disclosing stuff, but they've disclosed some like kind of scary things where it's like automatically responding to people or mimicking their own voice back to them for no apparent reason. And yeah, that makes a headline, and then they go, Apple's partner is engaged in this, or like has been reported to do this thing. I think it's just them distancing themselves a bit to say, hey, we're allowing you to send things out to this through their through Apple Intelligence, but it's going out to them. We're not partnered with them like at a core.
And that yes, that's, I guess, that's the most, I guess, insidious negative option you can pick from the list there, and that is this idea that maybe Apple knows something we don't about this stuff. And I will say, like, I think people in any industry, not just tech, right? Like you get this inside information that kind of isn't released to the public. And it's kind of like you call up your buddy, right? Say you want to hire someone, right? And you're like, oh, I know someone who worked for this guy. Let me call him and be like, hey, what's really going on with this? Is this a good guy? Is he cool to hire? And a lot of times they'll be like, well, his resume looks great, but man, he was the worst in the room, or something like that, So, so that could be a thing here. There's many OpenAI people who have quit kind of in protest. And
like recently.
Yeah, and I'm sure the stuff that they kind of say to the public is a lot more diplomatic than what they say behind closed doors. And it's possible that they told Apple, or people from Apple, and Apple, I'm sure, no company is going to give someone $1 billion without a little bit of due diligence at least. And they could be hearing things like, this Altman guy is like kind of off his rocker. He's crazy. Like, this isn't a good guy to be in business with. Like, all kinds of things. The tech actually is way scarier than we think. The tech actually is way worse than we think. Like, there's all kind of ways you could go with it. So that definitely could be a thing behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, and OpenAI is also talking about shifting from nonprofit to for-profit, and a lot of people are just questioning what that even means. I just feel like they are in such a transitory period right now and figuring out what their company is. They clearly have this amazing technology, but don't really know where they're going to make money with it exactly. So, yeah, it just makes sense. Apple's like, we'll just maybe wait and see. And we're also diving full into Apple Intelligence and developing our own stuff. So we'll wait and see a little bit before we partner with this other company, because we might just be doing it ourselves and like it a lot better. I will say they're using Apple Intelligence. A lot of the built-in summary stuff is way cooler than I expected. Like, I keep getting those text summaries, and it does a really good job.
I am way in on web page summaries in Safari. Like, it is nice. It does it really well. It makes a really effective summary. I like how on if and I've used it a lot on desktops. That's what I'm referencing right now. But it'll do kind of the reader, like, because I go in reader mode all the time for stuff, just to like declutter websites, but then have like kind of a second pane where you can get the AI summary, and it's got clickable options in there. So it's almost like an outline it'll build you if it's a long website with like list or something in it. So you can actually like click on the AI summary and it'll take you to that spot on the web page.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool features in there. So yeah, like Apple's like summary tech I think is pretty good. You were showing me some examples of text message summaries that it was the exact scenario we had joked about, where me, you, and our producer were all in a group thread, and you had ignored us for several hours, and you got the summary of what we were talking about. So you're like, oh, I don't have to go back and read all these messages. So yeah, like the summary stuff seems, I think it's going to be a hit with people. It's pretty cool.
And that's some of that on-device stuff where it's because you open your phone and it's already done it for you. You're not having to prompt it at all. This is just going on all the time, and that's that on-device stuff where it's just constantly doing this. I open Mail, and below the description, or the subject line of the email, there's the description, and it used to just be like the first words of the email, and now it's a little summary of what the email is about. And yeah, the text message thing is really cool because it will show you 8 or 20 messages from here and then give you a 2-sentence really brief summary of what is being talked about, and you can very quickly go, do I need to click into this right now and read all 20? Because it's much easier to just suss it out with that summary. So that is all the stuff that I think Apple is working on, and maybe they're also seeing it in development where I don't know, that those features didn't seem as exciting as because we've been working with ChatGPT and we're seeing all these exciting LLMs. It's like they're just going to summarize stuff, but now that it's actually being delivered to customers and they're seeing it in beta, they might be seeing this is maybe the more useful thing, especially today, for customers to actually use. So we don't need to partner right now with OpenAI.
Yeah, you gotta get people where they live, right? Like a lot of the flashy features people don't need a lot, but these small, it's I don't know if it is the summary feature, but it's going to be these smaller uses of AI that get people really on board with AI's ability. I think about the Apple Watch when it launched, like the fitness stuff way down the list on kind of what they were hyping about this thing, and now that it's the top of the list, right? Because as people really started using it, they're like, oh, that's what I like about this thing, not whatever the designer watch straps or whatever the stuff that they were originally promoting about it. So I could definitely see that sort of thing being what really gets people connected with AI. I do have one other theory about why Apple did invest in AI. And that is because they're losing so much money on making movies right now.
Oh,
that was my transition. That was my transition. That's my transition to the next topic.
Great.
Yeah, you like that? Which is just how much money Apple has lost on original movie content. So, on the list, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Argylle. Have you seen any of these movies?
I saw Argylle, which is actually arguably the worst of the three, but I haven't seen the other two yet. I want to. I've heard Killers of the Flower Moon is great. I'm sure Napoleon is at a certain level of goodness if it's Ridley Scott. Have you seen them?
So yeah, I've seen all three of them, and I think all three of them, kind of the point of this article is basically saying these were expected to do well at the box office because these had theatrical releases, not just streaming Apple TV Plus releases, and they were expected to do well, and they were all kind of a disappointment. All three of them, which I think all three of them are solid films. I think these are all good movies, and definitely your mileage is going to vary depending on what kind of movie you like. But if one of these types of movies is your kind of movie, you're going to like it. You're going to like these, know? But I think Apple is probably trying to be a friend to the arts and get good PR and stuff like that. And they are letting these directors run amok, man. Like these films are, all three of these films I think are long, like longer than they should be. I think that all three of these are funny because these are very kind of auteur directors. It's Scorsese, Ridley Scott, and Matthew Vaughn are those three directors, and they both all three of those guys have very distinct styles. And
Yeah.
all three of these movies crank those styles to 11. Yeah. So, so if you like these directors and you want to see more of their type of stuff, here's a bunch of 3-hour movies with all that in it. The problem is, I think they hurt them in the flows of the film. Take Argyle, for example, which has probably 5 or 6 like insane action set pieces, like just like Matthew Vaughn always does. For you guys who don't know Matthew Vaughn, the Kingsman probably is most, which Argyle is part of the Kingsman universe, I guess. It's why it's a Kingsman movie. But these like over the top action scenes they're kind of funny and have like a weird premise. There's like I said, there's like 5 or 6 of those in Argyle, and you probably need 2 for it to be an effective movie. So like by the time you get to the 5th one, you're like, oh, what, another slow-mo insane action sequence with, whatever, heads exploding or whatever it's going to be. Napoleon, same kind of thing, right? Where it's just like, man, we're in like 3rd hour on this, and there's a lot of scenes that seem to go nowhere. But boy, do they look beautiful, right? Classic Ridley Scott. Same with Scorsese. Killers of the Flower Moon, obviously very critically lauded, probably the most critically successful of these 3 films. But again, if you're someone who's trying to sell tickets in a movie theater, this isn't the kind of film that's going to do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because Apple, I don't know, this puts them into that space where they are taken seriously, I guess. Because you see Martin Scorsese's doing a movie for Apple, like, okay, they must be serious. They're not just making whatever content to get iPhone users. Like, they're making real stuff. It's coming to theaters. And at the end of the day, to a certain degree, you can kind of just do that when spending a lot of money, which is what they have done here, is spent a lot of money on these things, hire the right person, and Martin Scorsese with a few $100 million or whatever the budget was of that movie can get it done, and then you can slap your Apple name on top of it and then work through whatever distribution is necessary. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see that these haven't made back what they were supposed to in theatrical releases, but I think it's kind of funny because that's the business they're in as well, as streaming, and like that.
So why do you care, Apple? Right? Like
taken the business from the theatrical side of things.
Yeah, it's like who that I kind of like. Again, like these movies. Look, I love going to the movie theaters, man. I go to movies all the time. Love a theater. You do too.
Same.
We're movie guys. You know.
Yeah.
But I still need to weigh. Oh, like I'm going to be able to watch this on streaming in a month. Do I need to see this one in the theater, or do I want to go see whatever that new A24 film that I know is not going to stream for 6 or 7 months somewhere? So it's like when I'm making that decision, like knowing that it's going to be on streaming soon, that cuts the knees out from under it right away. And then the economics of these things are crazy because it's a weird like entertainment industry thing. But so the way actors and anyone who's above the line in a film, so kind of the directors, actors, writers, all those are by union rules get paid what's called residuals. So every time a movie is shown on TV, right, that every time Indiana Jones comes on TV, Harrison Ford gets a check because he was a union actor in a union film, and they have these formulas that figure it out and they cut money for him, right? But streaming rules are weird because the streamers are making it. There's no kind of back-end residuals on a lot of stuff. And that is why, that's one of the reasons actors had to strike recently. This is one of the big rules, or one of the big issues they were having. So a lot of streaming, the streamers will pay more upfront for the big-name actor because they know there's no big back-end payment coming to those actors, right? And that just, and residuals are the smallest part of this. The real things are in back-end production points. Like, so if you're named a producer on it, and you get a certain percentage off the gross of that film, which is, why Robert Downey Jr. is a billionaire, right? Because he had back end points on like almost every Marvel movie, right? So it's that kind of stuff but in the streaming world, there's none of that, right? Like that doesn't exist. It's just streaming for free from to subscribers. So having back end points doesn't matter at all. This is also, Scarlett Johansson was going to sue Disney for this because they didn't do a theatrical release for the Black Widow movie. So another example of that. All of that is really coming together to say that these movies cost a lot upfront to make. And because they're not paying people over long term, they can't use weird Hollywood accounting to make that number even less than it normally does. It's very famous in Hollywood. No movie ever makes a profit because the second it makes a profit, you got to start paying all these people. So that, they come up with all these reasons why it never made a profit. But that doesn't exist at all in the streaming model. So yeah, Apple is spending billions on this stuff, which Apple has the money to burn. But at some point, they've got to ask themselves, well, why are we doing this, right? Like, because the streaming service is fairly cheap. Apple TV Plus, great streaming service. I would argue possibly the best quality of any streaming service in terms of the, like if you randomly pick an Apple TV Plus show, it's probably going to be good.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like if you randomly pick a show on Netflix, good luck, man. Like you're gonna get something insane, probably, right? So it's just goes back to this. Well, what's Apple even doing this for? And is this really selling more iPhones for them? Is it really getting people to subscribe more and make money in services, which is where Apple makes an immense amount of money? And if the answer is no, I could see them scaling back all this stuff. Like, why even bother?
And yeah, it seemed like maybe this was kind of their new push with Steve Jobs. They always talked about music because the iPod was there at all the events, and then like the last part of the event would be like Bono comes up and sings a song. I feel like Chris Martin might have been a part of it at some point. All of these artists, and then they'd be talking about the latest iPod or whatever, and it was like this angle of we support music beyond just selling devices, but at the same time it's selling devices, of course. And so I feel like they were kind of moving that direction with film stuff to be like, we support TV and film, and here's all these shows that we're making, and we're making it at a high level with the actors you've heard of, and we're keeping this alive. But yeah, now they're going, oh, okay, this costs a lot of money. So apparently I don't know the numbers on what they lost on those, but the numbers were pretty bad on how much they had lost previously, and they reportedly still plan to spend about $1 billion a year on original content for Apple TV Plus. So they're not just wiping it out, but they're going to do a lot less blockbuster, huge movies, which overall might not be the worst. We should be able to get a lot of good lower budget movies, and maybe they don't have to accelerate. Maybe they don't have to win it all back at the box office, which could be a good thing for us getting good movies. But they still do plan to do limited theatrical releases so that they can still qualify for awards, which is, I don't know, that's kind of the technique that a lot of people are doing these days.
Yeah, I mean, that people have always kind of done that, right? Like small theatrical release windows that just enough to qualify for the Oscars or whatever it is. And a lot of times that's what these stars and directors, they won't do a film unless they can have that in the contract. They say like, oh yeah, I'll do it. It has to get a theatrical run, so I'm eligible for awards for it. So that way they still feel like they're still making art and not just, content for a giant tech corporation.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that's a lot about movies, but also a lot about Apple Intelligence. Apple kind of is expanding and has expanded and is continuing to expand in all of these different areas. Apple Intelligence, AI is where they're really focused right now. They still want to keep making movies, but they're going to be spending less for the time being. So Killers of the Flower Moon 2 looks like it's not going to make it.
Probably not.
for multiple reasons aside from the money, but also for the money.